Hello, I'm Dr. Steve Hassan. It is Wednesday, May 21st for my live stream. Thanks to my team. And as usual, there is so much upsetting news that's being thrown at us. But before we get into it and answer your questions, I wanted to just say that this week's podcast and Substack blog and interview was with Jane Borden, who wrote a fascinating book called Cults Like Us, How Doomsday Thinking Drives America. Lots of good feedback for that. And next week, we're planning to release L. Hardy's book on Pentecostalism, the fastest growing religion in the world, and lots of discussions about how issues related to that. So stay tuned with that. And I'd like to start today news before responding to questions and comments on the topic of free speech. Something that the Koch Corporation, the John Birch Koch Corporation, that's one of the biggest fossil fuel corporations in the world. And I did an interview with a man who did a book called Kochland about the corporate cult of Koch, have been pushing free speech and fire and Donald Trump and Musk and other people are like, free speech, we need free speech. And then rock music icon Bruce Springsteen expressed free speech while he was over in Europe. And Donald Trump flipped out and just called him all kinds of unflattering names. And I was like, oh my goodness, Bruce Springsteen, who has been the champion of working men and supposedly Trump's core base, he was attacking Bruce Springsteen and calling him, like he looks like a prune. Have you looked at Bruce Springsteen's recently? He looks frickin' great. And unlike Trump, he's not overweight and obese, and he plays for hours. And he's a legend. I wanted to just move to the side. Here's part of a photo that I purchased of Bruce Springsteen at Boston Garden, taken by a friend of mine who was a Boston Globe Pulitzer Prize winning photographer, Stan Grossfeld. But I did a live stream yesterday spontaneously on Instagram, just saying that, what's your favorite Springsteen song? And let's everybody talk about Bruce Springsteen and his music. And I think that it was a major error strategically by Trump. And I definitely believe that musicians, artists, and I should mention Taylor Swift as well, we need to have people speaking up and saying what a horrible administration this has been. And on top of that, let's talk about Trump giving up on Ukraine and trying to talk Putin into negotiating, and it didn't go well. Wow, what a surprise and what a shock. Just absurd stuff. And Trump saying we're going to do much more trading with Russia. That's because Russia recruited Donald Trump as an asset, not an agent, in the 80s, according to former KGB official Yuri Shvets, who I interviewed regarding Craig Unger's book, American Compromat. And so many people keep saying to me, there's no proof that Russia is involved with Trump. And it's like, open your eyes. When in Helsinki, way back when, Trump said, I trust Putin and I don't trust Homeland Security, the CIA, and the FBI. Remember that? Wasn't that kind of perplexing? When Donald Trump fired James Comey as FBI director, they had a media meeting in the Oval Office with Russian media and no American media. Wasn't that a bit of a clue? Not to mention the Mueller report naming agents from Russia that were involved in the 2016 election. So anyway, I really think that going forward, there are going to be more and more people getting disillusioned with Trump, especially. I want to say one more thing before I get into the GOP bill, but Kristi Noem, the Secretary of the Homeland Security, was asked about habeas corpus, and she didn't understand that it was a constitutional right. She answered that it's the right of the president to deport people, which is the opposite of what's reality. So very concerning. And now in today, what's happening in DC, from what I understand, is this massive bill is being trying to be put on the floor of Congress that will increase our deficit by trillions of dollars. Remember Doge and how they were going to save government money, but they were firing everybody with essential services and taking away money for grants and scientific research? Well, it's this bill, if it goes through, is going to make the deficit worse, and they're talking about taking away Medicaid benefits for millions of Americans who need health care. And then there's the extreme right-wing GOP that thinks there's not enough cuts happening. So all I can say is I predict there's going to be many millions of people leaving the belief that Trump has been chosen by God and is a great leader and a great negotiator who is going to solve the Ukraine war in a day and solve the problem with Israel and Hamas and Gaza. And it's a mess, people. So, but as we go forward, I just want to encourage people to stay active. Don't overload yourself with too much negative news. The mind can only handle so much in a given period of time. And I really encourage you to think about like choosing an area of their own interest and kind of focus on that. My focus is freedom of mind and the whole topic of psychological influence, hypnosis, mind control, and cults. So that's my opening comments. All I can say is that we need to develop more coalitions. We need to be reaching out to our family and friends and coworkers who voted for Trump and warmly ask them what they think about the GOP bill. What's their understanding about it? What do they think about Trump giving up on a negotiated peace with Putin and doing more trade with Russia? You know, I think that's worth asking about the plane in Qatar. That is also worthy of asking, just asking, what do you think? And be patient and listen and don't argue. Just get them thinking and let them know that we need to pull together vast coalitions of Americans to oppose the Trump administration. Okay, we have our first comment question from Mary. Dr. Hassan, first time on your live. Welcome. I've watched a lot of videos, read your books. The question is about Curtis Yarvin and the Dark Enlightenment. What are your thoughts on Curtis Yarvin? Bad actor. That's what I think. And if you haven't seen my interview, excuse me, with Greg Epstein on his fine book for MIT Press, Tech Agnostic. It's a book all about how big tech is the new world religion, and Musk and Zuckerberg and Bezos and others are trying to push their power and extend their power. And the notion that there needs to be a CEO / king in charge of America, or network states, it's going to totally reorganize what we grew up in America believing America was all about. Rule of law, separation of church and state. So there's lots of critiques on Curtis Yarvin. I am negative on what he's trying to propagandize about. And I'm for supporting human beings. And I believe in love, and I believe in compassion. I believe in helping the poor and the downtrodden and immigrants, and not othering any minority group or deporting people without due process. So that's my thoughts about Curtis Yarvin at the moment. Let's see, we have G.J. Thomas. I live in London, UK. Trump isn't liked over here. The hatred and division are heartbreaking to watch. I don't understand why Musk is considered smart. I find him pretty dumb. Thanks. I have friends overseas in the UK. John Atack is the world's expert on Scientology, lives in Nottingham, England. I talk with him every week. I've been interacting a lot with Canadians who hate Trump as well, and they don't understand why Americans could kiss the ring of a demagogue fascist who wants to strip them of their well-being, that wants to decrease taxes on the wealthy and increase taxes on the poor, which is the opposite of what needs to happen for us to correct the downward trend of what's happening. Let's see, Hannah on TikTok gave some gifts. Thanks so much. Yeah, we're trying to develop freedom of mind. We're developing our YouTube channel. I'm recording special things there. We're going to be developing it as a channel with some premium content. Still on Substack. People are generously helping support me there. I did a live with Lev Parnas. I have to look into doing lives on Substack too. But thank you for your support. It means a lot, and it means we can keep going. Sandra says, reality is that the U.S. is drawing us closer to the end. Why has he not been held accountable by Congress? Why have they stopped the impeachment process? So even when the Democrats were in the majority, they were unsuccessful in getting a conviction for Donald Trump, even though he tried to do a violent coup. And Pence wouldn't agree to do that. And it really comes down to Republican congressmen and senators who are not caring about their constituents, caring more about themselves and their political career, and doing what they're told to do. And I want to state categorically, because people say, if you voted for Trump, are you in the cult of Trump? And I say no. However, if anybody currently espouses and believes that Trump won the 2020 election, that Biden won, or says that January 6th was a peaceful protest and wasn't a violent attempt to subvert the transfer of power, if they subscribe to that, then they're in the cult of Trump. And my understanding, in order to get positions in this administration, they had to agree with those lies. And if you haven't read 1984 by George Orwell, By the way, did you know that George Orwell was a pen name of Eric Blair? Just a little factoid. But truth is falsehood and freedom is slavery. Everything gets twisted around backwards to confuse people and to trick their minds and to make them give up and follow blindly an authoritarian. And by the way, bad news about Joe Biden's prostate cancer, but have you been following how demented Trump has been when he's speaking, where he can't even have a train of thought that is congruent? Very concerning. Let's see, Mia. To what level should we be broadcasting our disdain for the current administration? Can this push cult individuals further away from waking up? Is it ever too much? So for me, I think it's about the messaging, and I think that we need to stop before we like and share things on social media. We do not want to amplify falsehoods or stories that we would like to believe is true, but it hasn't been verified. I do think we need to definitely share our concerns, as I am doing here, exercising my free speech. But I try my best to be very respectful and aim at being open with everybody to change my mind if there's evidence that is convincing for me to hear another point of view. And what I've been saying for decades now, since exiting the Moonies, what doesn't work talking to a cult member is attacking their leader, their doctrine, or their policy head on, because it makes them defensive and pushes them deeper in. But what does work is asking warm, respectful, curious questions and talking about other groups that they would agree are destructive, such as Chinese communist brainwashing or pimps and traffickers, and then discussing, well, what is brainwashing? What's their understanding? And if they don't know, you can talk about Lifton and his 8 criteria, having studied in the 50s ex-Chinese, members of the Chinese Communist brainwashing program, or my BITE model. But the key thing is people need to change their own minds, not feel like they're being pressured by anyone, that they have to conform. And I love and I want to encourage people to amplify folks who were Trump supporters who are now messaging, to amplify their messaging. So share those, because they're sharing their firsthand experience, and I try to do that as well. Let's see. Dr. Hassan just wanted to say I emailed Freedom of Mind about the governing body being subpoenaed to court in New York. Just wanted to let you know. Keep up the amazing work, especially the podcast. Thank you so much. The Jehovah's Witnesses, JWs, Watchtower Society, major pedophile scandal, blood transfusion. They wrongly interpret the Bible to say you shouldn't have a blood transfusion. So many problems with that authoritarian cult. So many people have read Combating Cult Mind Control and exited the Watchtower. Same with Latter-day Saints, the Mormons. And by the way, I have a new edition out, Understanding Cults. It's a workbook with links to a lot of my Substack blogs and videos and resources connected to my courses. And if you don't know that I have an online 9-hour course that if you're a clinician, a psychiatrist, psychologist, social worker, you can get CE credits for it. And there's a version for everybody else that's less expensive, and you don't have to take the test. Let's see, Leela, I am an art PhD student from Iran studying in Poland. My topic is about brainwashing and how art can be a tool to fight against brainwashing. My method is slightly simulate brainwashing techniques. That sounds interesting. Oh, she goes on through interactive art installations to make a better understanding of how cult leaders brainwash. What is your opinion about my approach? I'm a big fan of any creative, artistic ways to message. Um, if you know my work, I'm a big fan of art therapy, music therapy, somatic therapy, massage therapy, um, family sculpting, psychodrama. So the bottom line is what works, and what works for one person may not work for another person. And so try it out. I'm very interested and curious what you are working on. And I can say that my influence continuum and bite model, I still believe, is the simplest way to explain the differences between healthy influence and unhealthy, and remind people to go back to their values before they got hacked or before they changed their mind and got involved with a group that seems to be controversial. G.J. Thomas, is it true that in certain states the stolen election claim will be taught in schools? Wow. I seem to remember seeing something about Oklahoma. I'm not sure if it's more than one place, and I'm not sure if it's a statewide thing or just a particular school thing. But if we're looking at the fascist authoritarian playbook, books will be burned, taken away from libraries. People will be given only propaganda to memorize and study. And for all of us who grew up in freedom, unlike people who were raised in the Soviet Union, who didn't know what it was like to be free, for those of us here who know what it's like to be free, this is a very bitter pill to swallow. And honestly, I never intend to swallow it because I'm very clear-minded on values. Like, science matters. Facts matter. There is no such thing as alternate facts. There is no such thing as alternate truths. That's propaganda or lies. And I really want to encourage people to control their own minds, to have clarity over what they believe and their values, and be able to listen and articulate those with people who have been co-opted, and with the purpose of just saying, well, I understand this is what you believe. Are you interested in knowing what I believe, and being able to articulate that? Let's see. Have a 5. Do you believe the cult identity people adopt is what allows MAGA members who are racial minorities to ignore the fact that MAGA is rooted in white supremacy? Rubio's testimony in Senate scared me. That is my operating model. And for those who haven't heard me say this before, that for me, brainwashing and mind control is best understood as a dissociative disorder. In other words, unlike the word brainwashing, which elicits an image in your mind of a blackboard with writing on it, and then someone takes a wet sponge and washes the board and then writes new things on it, I think the more accurate model is to say the person's self, like Steve Hassan before the Moonies, who wrote poetry, played basketball, and liked girls. And then the Mooney Steve Hassan, made in the image of Sun Myung Moon and Hak Jahan, who was believing that the real Steve was satanic and fallen and evil and needed to be destroyed and kept down. So when I was a Mooney, my whole belief system was flipped. So even though I was educated as a Jew about the Holocaust, I was brainwashed to believe that the Jews had to be killed by God in the Holocaust because they didn't accept Jesus. If somebody had said to me before I got in, by the way, we're a religious group, I wouldn't have even gone to the first meeting, but they lied. And if they said, by the way, we think that, we think the Jews lost their relationship with God by not following Jesus and had to die in the Holocaust, I would have run in the other direction. So yes, I do believe there's a programming element. Another model, just to mention, is computer hacking. When you have a computer, you have an operating system, you get deceived into clicking on a link that installs malware and it takes over your operating system. Something like that. GJ, do you know Sam Vaknin? Yes, I do. He has a lot to say about Trump. So for those who've never heard that name, he wrote a book, I think it's called Self-Malignant Love. He's a self-professed narcissist, and he really is a narcissist. It's all about him. But he's able to articulate the mindset of a narcissist. And for young people going out on dates for years, I would suggest a particular video he made of how to know on your first date whether someone is a narcissist. And he lists a whole set of concerning behaviors. So I assume he says that Trump is a narcissist. In chapter 3 of The Cult of Trump, I described Trump as a malignant narcissist, which was Erich Fromm's term when he was analyzing Adolf Hitler. And in chapter 3, I parallel Trump with Jim Jones of People's Temple, Sun Myung Moon, my former cult leader of the Moonies, and Hubbard of Scientology. And I do think there's value in looking at other groups and hearing how intelligent people from nice families got hacked and got into these groups, and that people leave. Sometimes after many decades, but they do leave. They need to have a place to go to. They need an escape strategy, especially if they were born into it. Let's see, Menonymous on TikTok. I am especially curious about how people can influence others like Trump or the German dictator. How come a lot of people don't research to know if things are true or not? I think that in general, there's been, since the 80s, a systematic assault. It's called fourth generation psychological warfare. And it was written up officially by an American military strategist, William Lind, L-I-N-D, who, by the way, met with Trump in the first administration. This is psychological warfare aimed at attacking experts, attacking science, and attacking democratic institutions. And so there's been a deliberate effort to find a fault with an expert with the hope that it neutralizes all their good work because of a fault, as opposed to looking at a body of work and critical expertise and actually analyzing, is there any beef? Is there any, fruit that demonstrates the person is not an expert in the topic that they're in? And science, what a lot of people don't understand is the scientific method doesn't teach truth with a capital T. The capital T stuff is for religion, where people want to have certainty. Science is like exploratory. They believe in having a hypothesis, and then you do testing to see whether or not you can confirm the hypothesis. Some people do experiments to prove it. Then it's up to the scientific community to test, or what's called falsify, to show that it isn't correct. And so, for example, for decades, people were saying that ulcers was caused by stress or something, and there was a hypothesis, that it was actually a bacteria that was causing it. I think it's a bacteria or a virus, until it was proven that it really is, because it could get cured by a certain type of medication. So the idea is to be open-minded to changing your mind, to changing your theories, and that we need each other to pursue what's real and what's true, and avoid black and white, simplistic, good versus evil, us versus them thinking, because reality is complex and there's far more that we don't know than we know. So that's my little rant on that topic. Sandra, excellent calm tone with so much worthwhile factual and scientific information. Thank you so much, Dr. Hassan. Thank you, Sandra, for that compliment. It helps me keep going to know that it's helpful to folks. And let's see, uppercase low. Thanks for your good work, Doctor. Have you considered having Father David on here at some point? I think you two would get along. I don't know who Father David is. He's what one might call a true Christian, compassionate and kind. I've actually had Christians on my podcast, and am open to suggestions, especially if he has a book or he has a message or a TED Talk or something like that. Send it to center@freedomofmind.com. And I truly want people like the new Pope that is talking Jesus and helping the poor. The words of Jesus. Jesus was not for creating a political regime, and only blessing the wealthy. In fact, Jesus said it's harder for wealthy people to get to the kingdom of heaven. He says, blessed are those who are the lowest, or as you do to the least, you're doing it to me. So let's go back to values of love and help, and know that we've succeeded as a species out of helping each other, not out of greed and avarice and anger and hatred. Let's see. Deconstructing Mental Health on TikTok asks, do you find that people who have been in other high control environments, religions, families, etc., fall into cults more easily? This is a great, and the answer is yes. And so if you were developmentally raised in a high control environment, you were in a family where you were corporally punished, for example, where you were traumatized to obey authority and not your conscience, or not understand things, and you get away from that environment but don't study psychology or get counseling and get healthy, get a healthy sense of self, you could be more vulnerable to someone who mimics the certainty and the structure. And so there is this phenomenon known as cult hopping. But it's interesting because typically people will leave one cult, go into another cult, but they won't stay as long in that one. Then they may go to another one. They won't stay as long in that one. But some people get stuck, and one of the critical variables is lack of warm connections with non-believers. And that's why I tell, especially former members, if you meet someone who's in a group, whether it be they're proselytizing on a street corner or whatever, engage them and share a little bit of your story and how committed you were and what may have made you wake up and exit. So my message is that people need to understand and process their cult involvement. And unfortunately, most clinicians have no training in working with people who are raised in authoritarian cults. And so they typically will do trauma processing or whatever they were trained to do, but it doesn't get at the root dissociative disorder issues or the specialized techniques to help them heal, which I teach and teach in my course as well as in my books. So the critical thing to share, and people have seen this many times on previous, is this influence continuum graphic. It's on my freedomofmind.com website for free. And you can look at ethical influence versus unethical influence, the BITE model of authoritarian control, behavior, information, thought, and emotional control. I don't know if you heard a jet just sounded like it flew over my apartment, but anyway, hopefully you didn't. But people need to have a framework as they're meeting people, as they're exposed to different environments, and look for the healthy values. Is there informed consent? Is there respect for your conscience, for asking critical questions, for exerting your critical free will, leaving if you're not happy? And so yeah. So, and I can tell you that if you were raised believing you need a strong man, and let's say you were raised in the Soviet Union, and then you leave and go to Israel or go to some other country, and you still listen to RT TV or some Russian propaganda thing, it's gonna continue your authoritarian mindset, even if you are not a citizen any longer of Russia. And so be more susceptible to Netanyahu or other extremists who are saying things all or nothing, black and white, us versus them, and othering the Palestinians, etc. Let's see, Dr. Right Life Truth Teller, interesting name. Would you consider having Melissa Dougherty, authority of Happy Lies, on about new thoughts, concepts of deceiving about religion? I don't know who Melissa Dougherty is, and I don't know, when you say authority of Happy Lies, I don't know what that is. I can tell you, as a Mooni, we did heavenly deception, and Krishnas would do transcendental trickery. And I can also tell you, as a Mooni, I was told always to be happy to outsiders, never share doubts or express that I'm down or upset or anything like that, in order to recruit people into things. I'm doing my best to get back to my guidebook on how to talk to people involved with MAGA or authoritarianism on the left, to expand what I've written in the dark blue book over my shoulder, Freedom of Mind, and do something short and fast for people. Let's see. Deconstructing Mental Health on TikTok asks, why do you think evangelicals are so easily convinced to join the cult of Trump? Great question. My experience researching the cult of Trump is that there are many authoritarian cults that purport to be Christian, that have leaders who claim to be prophets or apostles, who claim to speak to God, who claim in many cases to speak in tongues, cast out demons, do faith healings, that that fulfill the behavior, information, thought, and emotional control of brainwashing. And so the people in these cults, these mega churches, are following their prophet or their pastor or their apostle, and it's that leader that's telling them to follow Trump. So at the point that their leader says, nope, God came to me and told me we're going to follow Vance, that the blessing has been taken away from Trump, they're going to follow Vance or anyone else that they tell the members to do. Legitimate evangelicals who understand the New Testament, who have an understanding of the history of religion, don't typically get involved at all with the cult of Trump as believers. Let's see. Be grateful. Dr. Hassan, I enjoy your videos and content. Thank you. Actually, I'm pretty sure I met you in your Mooney days in Berkeley where you were doing the deception routine. So glad you found your way out. Actually, you probably didn't meet me when I was in the Moonies because I was East Coast, not Berkeley, California. I was recruited at Queens College, and I started the CARP there. I was made assistant director of the Unification Church in Flushing. Then I was sent to 4 West 43rd Street at the national headquarters, where I lectured across the street from the public library in Manhattan. And my last gig for the Moonies was as a fundraising captain, something called MFT. That's when I nearly died in a van crash due to sleep exhaustion, which led to my deprogramming to get out. I was so brainwashed, I was so fanatical that I don't think without the accident and then my family begging me to talk to the ex-members to prove I wasn't brainwashed and in a cult, if I didn't have those circumstances, it's possible that I would have stayed in the cult all these decades. I'd like to believe that something would have happened that I would have gotten out, but I was really so disconnected from my true self by all of the sleep deprivation and brainwashing techniques. Let's see, SDR, my husband, born and raised Catholic, I guess. He almost joined Scientology in the 70s. In the 80s, he joined the Moonies. In the 90s, he joined the JWs. And he faded from the JWs in 2006. Wow. So I recommend you reading Combating Cult Mind Control. And then if you like it as much as I think you'll like it, share it with him and read it with him chapter by chapter, or suggest that he read it, because he has a lot of learning and processing to do. I can tell you that a lot of people that I've helped over the decades were born Catholic. They had nuns maybe that were hitting them with rulers and corporal punishment, and then when the pedophilia cover up was exposed, a lot of people left the Catholic Church and they got sucked into other authoritarian cults, many of which are Pentecostal cults. And next week, the Substack blog and video interview and my audio podcast is featuring a woman who's deeply researched Pentecostalism. I think you'll find it really, really interesting. So as we don't have any more questions yet, I'm just going to continue and say that what's happening now is unprecedented. People are still walking around in denial or wishful thinking. I can't tell you how many people I meet say that they're not even reading the news because it's too upsetting. And dialing yourself out of knowing what's happening is not okay, in my opinion, especially if you have children or grandchildren or you care about your brothers and sisters' kids. we really need to open our eyes to how extraordinary things are. And as I was saying earlier, we really need to be thinking about building coalitions in real life. Yes, we can do stuff online too, but to have real human beings in our lives doing stuff and not just upsetting stuff, doing art, doing music, doing poetry, playing with puppies, going to nature. Let's see, Kayla. Hi, Dr. Steve. Just wanted to say I saw the comments Bruce Springsteen made about Trump and thought it was really brave because he risks alienating his working class audience. And it got me thinking, how is Trump so easily able to brainwash the American working class into thinking he is one of us? I invite you to read my work, especially The Cult of Trump. So let me just say about Bruce Springsteen, Taylor Swift, George Clooney, Robert De Niro, other celebrities. I thank them for speaking up. They are in a position to influence people. And we want people to understand this is not okay, and exercise our free speech. And what people like Trump want is to intimidate with fear people from exercising critical free speech. And that's why when I learned what Trump was saying to Bruce Springsteen and threatening to investigate him, that he was getting paid to help Kamala Harris or some BS like that, I wanted to tell people, what's your favorite Springsteen song? What's your best memory of Springsteen? And amplify, 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 because it will get through. Music has that very unique ability to get to the person's authentic self, especially if they were fans of Bruce Springsteen. So from my 2 cents, I want to encourage all artists to exercise their free speech and to do it responsibly, and to not say anything that you can't back up, and point to specific behaviors that are concerning to you. We need to join together to oppose this authoritarian. Let's see, Carrie Martinez. Since when is it okay for a former president to take a foreign government's luxury jet? Never. Call it a gift, and no one in Congress bats an eye. Well, I disagree. The Democrats were screaming holy hell and saying that it is a role of Congress to actually decide if any gift can be given or accepted by a president. And Trump got around it supposedly by saying it was a gift to the Defense Department, not to him, even though it will go to him after he leaves office and he'll be able to use it. And it falls under the title of the term emoluments, where it's a well-known fact of psychology, and I'll cite my colleague and friend Robert Cialdini and his book Influence. It's a well-known fact that there's something called the law of reciprocity. If somebody does something nice for you, you want to reciprocate. And that's why it's not okay to accept gifts from foreign governments, because they may expect you to do something back to help them out. And on the topic of emoluments, excuse me, the whole topic of crypto, which Trump is saying, buy my coin and you can have a dinner with me. With crypto, there's no way of knowing who's giving money. So terrorists could be giving Trump money. Enemies of the United States could be giving money. to co-opt things. We know the fossil fuel industries and countries helped to elect him, and the crypto industry helped to elect him. He just pardoned someone in jail who was a crypto king or something. So there's so many things that are problematic. And the problem was that this last election, the GOP took over Congress and Senate, and all of these checks and balances are being systematically dismantled, and only loyalists are being put in charge, a la Opus Dei's Project 2025 of the Heritage Foundation. Carrie Martinez, what can we do to stop it? Even the national security implications are horrifying. So what I say is, and I say this to my clients, and I say this publicly, we need to think, I'm using my hands, what's within our personal control to do, and what's outside of our control to do. Some people have more capacity to do more. Some people are billionaires who could fund freedom of mind. Wink, wink, nod, nod. If we had more money, we could be developing courses. We could be doing so much better messaging than I see going out, right? If you don't have money, and you have a little bit of money, and you want to donate monthly instead of buying a coffee, to donate it to us, if with volume, and I think we're up to 135,000 followers now on Instagram. It's my biggest social media following. If everybody, gave $1 a month, I would be able to do so much more than my team is able to do, and what I'm able to do. So, and then there are things you can be doing locally, or you could be walking down the street and see two witnesses on the street, two JWs, and talk with them for 10 minutes. Because every little bit helps. Not that the JWs are supporters of Trump. They're not. But everyone that we can help get out of authoritarian mind control, the better. Let's see. Mia Granberry, do you think you will need to write a continuation of the cult of Trump as his administration continues on? Good question. I approached Simon & Schuster and offered to do an updated, expanded edition. They didn't want that. They agreed to re-release it, though, before the last election, with a forward by George Conway, the attorney, conservative attorney, and an afterward by myself. But yes, I could do another book on what's happening and psychological warfare, especially psychological warfare, which is online. People are being radicalized online, and people need to understand how it's being done, what they need to do to protect themselves and their children. So lots more work to do. I'm not close to retiring while my brain is working and my body's doing okay. Let's see. Juan Carlos. Hi, doctor. Spirituality is a basic human need, ? Because after being in a cult, it's difficult to separate religion from spirituality, at least in my case. So I think with words, when we think of the word religion, we think of an institution, a specific entity with rules and regulations and behavioral codes. When we think about spirituality, however, we're talking about something that's less defined, because I consider myself a spiritual person. I also do belong to a Jewish community, and I like to go to services and study Torah and do social justice with other friends there. But I really encourage you. It sounds like you haven't read my book, Combating Cult Mind Control, yet. And I recommend reading it because it will help you to pull apart the differences between healthy spirituality, healthy religious groups, and unhealthy ones. And I can say that a lot of ex-members walk around with phobias still intact in their minds, where someone leaves a Bible cult, for example, they don't even want to pick up a Bible, much less go into a church, because they don't trust it, or they're getting triggered. So that's where I talk about needing to do your homework and get specialized counseling, consulting, reclaim your personal power and your needs. I believe in prayer. I believe in meditation. I like dancing. I do yoga. Probably not as often as I should, because I sit in front of the computer too much, or at my standing desk. Anyway, Jenna, let's see, we're in our last 5 minutes. Wow, this time flies. Jenna Talida, hi, Dr. Steve. How can we combat this authoritarianism? It feels like we are aimlessly trying to address him. So the problem, as I see it, is that all of the people who are opposed to Trump are missing the critical framework. And that is brainwashing, mind control, cultism. And part of the problem with why people don't understand this is that we walk around as human beings with what's known as cognitive biases, which means unconscious biases. And we tend to think, when we look at people in cults, there's something wrong with them. They're weak, they're stupid, it could never happen to me. Instead of understanding that we're social beings, we're emotional beings, and that most people get into cults because they're deceived. They're either lied to, or vital information is withheld, or it's distorted, and they're sleep deprived, and ideas are being installed without their volitional agreement that it's okay to do that. So that's why I feel freedom of mind has such a vital role to play. If you look at other podcasters who are doing cult podcasting, they're not showing the big picture. And for me, the big picture is the influence continuum. I held it up before. And the BITE model of authoritarian control. We have a survey, a free anonymous survey at bitemodel.com that people can self-evaluate based on answering 40 questions of doesn't apply or applies a lot. And so if I had my way, I would have, and I tried to get this through to the Biden administration when they were in power, we should declare a public health emergency. We should approach it as we need to have inoculation programs of the mind control virus to teach people what to watch out for, how to protect themselves, expose people to former members and their stories, train clinicians, educators, media, politicians, and make it okay for people to leave, create an exit ramp by destigmatizing the fact that there are tens of millions of former cult members right now in the United States. And most people have never told anyone about their cult experience. And maybe they haven't done their homework, so they don't think of it as a cult until they hear a podcast or listen to a live stream, and they go, that reminds me of my fraternity, or that reminds me of that multi-level marketing group, or that reminds me of that boyfriend I had, or that girlfriend. Let's see. Anonymous on TikTok asks, how come in the eyes of Europe no one is doing anything about Trump? Well, the opposition to Trump is fragmented. If you've noticed, all of the Republicans are given specific talking points when they do interviews, and they're all doing a simple, unified message. And the opposition is reactive and all over the place, and they are not, and they're reacting to each crazy thing that is happening. And that's a deliberate strategy, by the way. It's a Russian propaganda strategy of overload, of throwing so much shit against the wall and watching what sticks. And what I want to say to everyone listening, it's about diverting people's attention from what is actually matters to something else. And if you understand that our minds can only handle a certain amount of attention, and we go into trance if too much is coming at us, we get numb, and we're unable to process too many things. So it's a fundamental, hack that's being done on people. We need to get coalitions to have a unified message and determine strategically not just what to do now, but to start building a 30-year plan for resurrecting democracy, at least a 10-year plan, not just get through to the next election cycle or the 2028 election cycle. Not long enough. We need to stop being reactive and be proactive. But it starts with a correct diagnosis over what is happening. And what's happening is a coup. That's what's happening. They want to destroy our country and our way of life. And they want to turn it into a fascist state, unfortunately. That's the facts. Let's see, Tim Jones, as we're wrapping up, this will be the last question, team. It's 3:01. What's the difference between strong leadership and coercive control? How can we tell the difference? Please go to freedomofmind.com and download this graphic and look at what's healthy leadership and what's unhealthy leadership. These are just, I could expand these and talk much more about each of these levels, but this is the quickie one pager that we created. That's how to tell the difference. And with that, I want to thank my team. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, our Substack, join us on social media, and stay engaged, but not overwhelmed. Take care of yourself. It's your mind and only you should control it. Take care.